Today's video is sponsored by BetterHelp.com, and I've been with them for a long time. BetterHelp is an online platform where we found that you can effectively communicate with your therapist. Now, you begin by filling out a questionnaire, and then you'll be matched with a therapist within a couple of days. And if that match isn't ideal for you, you can certainly make an adjustment there. Now, you're going to be encouraged to journal, and also they have the availability for group therapy on a wide array of topics, and I really like that. So as the need exists, go ahead and take the necessary steps to get the help that you need. And just know that BetterHelp has a 4.5 rating on Trustpilot, so it indeed is a platform you can trust. There's a link below the video that will take you there. Maneuvered into a wrong direction because of that narcissist. It may be that narcissist once was a friend that you trusted, or it may have been a sibling or a spouse that you once trusted, and that person betrayed you, and they just abandoned you, and it caught you off guard because you weren't expecting it to happen from that person who turned out to be somebody that you had no idea was really there. It could be that you've been verbally or emotionally or physically abused, and the anger and the hurt that goes along with that doesn't just dry up real quickly. It may be that after all of the difficulty you've had with that person, you find out that to other individuals you've been lied about, you've been on the receiving end of the smear campaign. That creates anger, and it stores up on the inside of you. Now, there are multiple reasons that anger and the accompanying hurt and pain is so difficult to purge. First and foremost, one of the reasons is the treatment that you've received is just grossly unfair. How many times have you said to yourself, this just isn't fair, especially when you know that narcissist is so deeply flawed and they're seeming to get away from it, and you may have your flaws, but it's like, I'm not nearly as bad as that person, and when you try to weigh the scales of justice, it doesn't add up. Or another reason that the anger can linger is that that unfairness continues on. And by that, I mean, sometimes you find out when you think the relationship with that person is done, they're not going to let up. They can still do things behind your back to turn people against you, or they may have hindered your financial capabilities. And sometimes the lingering effect just goes on and on. You know, the proverbial gift that keeps on giving, except this is one I didn't ask for. And then in addition, another reason that the anger can linger is you can carry all sorts of emotional scars in the aftermath. And by that, I mean your exposure to that narcissistic person may have taken its toll on your self-esteem. You may have some doubts about your own legitimacy. You know, do I really make sense? Maybe that person was right. Sometimes you just have such a deep sense of embarrassment and futility that you don't want to face other individuals. Sometimes you have loneliness and confusion as you ask yourself the question, who's going to understand what I have to say? I mean, I don't even have the time to explain it to everybody anyway. Another reason that your anger can linger is when you look at the pervasiveness of that narcissist pathology, it's just so difficult to comprehend. Why would anyone treat me the way that person did? What's going on? And it may be that you just have a hard time finding any kind of answer that satisfies in that category, and I totally get that. In addition, another reason that the anger can linger is you look back and you think, well, my biggest mistake is I was loyal. My biggest mistake is I was optimistic. In other words, your best characteristics were used against you. And it's like, how did that happen? I thought that I was trying to be a decent person, and that got taken away from me. And then over time, emotional fatigue settles in. I know I need to do something different. I know I need to come to terms with my emotions, but right now I'm just emotionally spent. And then another reason that the anger can linger is sometimes, just being honest, your own personality may be working against you. And by that, I mean, you may be the kind of person who likes to have your own personal events tied down. You know, you like to have things neat and predictable and in their place. And if that's not the case, then you can have some strain there. Or it may be that you're a natural appeaser or people pleaser. And as a result, you have a hard time dealing with individuals who are so much the opposite of that. Or it could be that you're the kind of person that's naturally inclined towards anxiety anyway, or depression. And so all of that can come into play. So you've been mistreated, and you have the anger and you have the accompanying hurt that just continues to hold on, and it's settling on the inside of you, and you know you're not being as effective of a person as you'd like to be because of that. How are you going to handle that? Now, let me throw some thoughts at you. Some are going to be things that you might consider to be predictable that I would say. Some are going to be difficult, okay? First, we're going to say when you look at your anger, embrace it. Now, when I say embrace it, I don't mean, hey, you just be as angry as you want. If that person doesn't like a dose of their own medicine, that's too bad for them. No, but what I am saying is sometimes that anger doesn't need to be ignored. Sometimes there's a legitimacy to the anger. Anger is, after all, tapped into your sense of self-preservation. It's your way of saying, I wish that I could be treated with a certain amount of respect. Hold on to that, because it's not entirely wrong for you to feel what you feel. The hurt, the anger is part of your warning system that tells you, I need to be careful about the kind of people that I give myself over to. Another thing I would say to you, and this is part of the difficult piece of it, and that is make sure that you let go of the identity as the wronged one. Okay? Now, you have been wronged. But you want to be careful that you don't let that become your entire identity. You may have been victimized, but you don't want to have the victim status as the centerpiece of your personality. That's what narcissists do. And so we're not going to deny the fact that you were wrong, that you were victimized. We want to say, though, that doesn't have to be the sum total of who you are and how you think of yourself. And I know people who, when they have been on the receiving end of something legitimately wrong, that's all that you ever hear about them. We don't want that to be completely the case. Now, they cannot say that out loud, but you can see that that's exactly what's going on. And I want to take you back to preschool, toddler kids. If you have a 4-year-old kid that, a playmate or a sibling has said or done something that, or a parent has said or done something that they don't like, what they'll do is they'll have an outburst. They'll get angry, and they'll yell, or they'll complain and gripe and say no, and they'll say no with a bad look on their face. They're not capable, they're not articulate enough yet at age 4 to say, hey, mom or dad or whoever it is, what you said is kind of hurting me, so let's sit down and talk about that so that we can have a good meeting of the minds. Well, they're 4 years old. They can't talk like that. When you have an adult who goes straight into that narcissistic anger, they're like that 4-year-old kid. They're hurting on the inside, but instead of saying that, they can't articulate it. And so the anger comes out, but make no mistake, it's their way of saying, I'm in strain, I'm in difficulty, I don't really know how to handle this situation very well in front of me, but I just don't know how to put words to it. It just comes out as a childish outburst of anger. Now, another thing that's behind the scenes and what their anger really tells us, the narcissist, if they were honest, would say something like, I fear that you're judging me right now. That's what's going on when they have the anger. When you say we have a problem, or there's something that I'd like for us to consider, or that didn't work for me, rather than them saying, okay, talk with me about it. In their mind, it's like, you're judging me, aren't you? You're deeming me to be inadequate. You're deeming me to be no good. What's going on with you anyway? Why is it that you can never appreciate what I bring? And on they can go. And you're thinking, I'm just trying to talk procedure here. I'm trying to develop a sense of coordination. This is not about me judging. Oh, you're judging me. And they have such a fear of being shamed. They have such a fear of being deemed no good or unworthy that the anger is their way of saying, I don't respond well to that. Or in addition, as you're trying to understand their anger, if the narcissist could be honest enough, they would actually say, well, actually, when I'm angry, it's because I'm arrogant enough to assume that you're supposed to think just like me. And so the anger is coming from their place of arrogance. In other words, they want to be superior. And it's like, I think really well, you don't. You're beneath me, and I'm above you. Don't you forget it. That's what's really going on as they experience anger. And then right along on the heels of that, the anger is their way of trying to communicate or convey, I need to be the one who is in control here. In other words, I have to have the final word. How many times have you had a dispute with an angry narcissist and you know they've got to have the last word and they have to make sure that they ram it home? And that leads to another hidden thought that's part of their anger. And if they could be honest, it would be, and I fear you being in control of me. They're fear-based. They operate with a great deal of defenses. They don't want you to have any kind of say because in their mind, it's like, well, you're trying to take me out of my well-crafted false front that I'm trying to put on here, and I don't do that very well. Likewise, behind the scenes in their anger, what they're really wishing to convey is, you need to hear me even though I don't need to hear you. In other words, I talk about a double standard. It's their way of saying, look, why don't we just establish, since this is me, and since I'm so smart and I'm so good and excellent and I'm the best person, empathy's not necessary here because that just means it's you, and I don't need to consider you because I'm the ultimate. And there's a gross arrogance there, but it's a false arrogance. But there's only one person in this equation that matters, and that's me. It's not you. I don't need to understand you. Then likewise, part of their anger that is part of the message that's conveyed by their anger is they're really saying, I can't work with you because I can't trust. Now notice I didn't say I can't trust you, although since you're on the stage with them, that's obviously implied. But they just can't trust in general. You happen to be the person in front of them, but they don't trust anybody else either. Rather than them saying, I like being open with people and I like being vulnerable and sharing my needs and thoughts and feelings. It's like, nope, I haven't gotten to that level of enlightenment yet, and tomorrow's not looking any better. So they don't trust. And then also, if they could be honest, what's behind the scenes in their anger, it really is their way of saying, whenever I am being overpowering toward you, keep in mind that is in direct proportion to me feeling inadequate. They can't access that thinking at all. As many of you are aware, I have a deep history of doing work in the anger management category. I've written books on the topic. I've conducted seminars and workshops. In fact, one of my webinars here on this channel is about managing your anger properly. And whenever I talk about the subject, one of the first questions that I like to start with is it ever reasonable or rational to have an experience of anger? Now, the answer is yes. Now, so many people have such bad experiences with anger. Sometimes it comes from within themselves. Sometimes it's at the hand of other individuals who don't manage it well, that we just think of anger categorically as being a negative emotion. But really, there are two factors that go into the making of reasonable, rational anger. One is we have to ask, well, what is it that's triggering it? And then number two is, and how do you manage it? In its best case scenario, the anger is going to be your response to someone showing disrespect to your dignity or your worth as a human. The anger can be a response to people ignoring your valid needs, particularly in a repetitive way. Or anger can be a response to people coming against your core values and beliefs and standards. And when you look at it that way, it's like, well, there are simply times when you just need to stand up for yourself. Anger taps into your sense of self-preservation. So it is possible to be rational in the way that you maintain anger. Now, you'll also notice implied in what I'm saying is there's a certain amount of self-restraint that we need to maintain, and we need to curtail egotism and things of that nature, which then takes me to the narcissist. Narcissists do not approach anger with any kind of rationality. And I want to give you 7 reasons why I would say that. And it's going to be so essential for you to know what you're dealing with, because they're going to come at you with a great deal of irrationality, and they want to hook you in ways that allow them to have dominance over you, and we can't let that happen. The first thing we're going to say about narcissists and what they bring to the topic of anger is the entire pattern of narcissism is built upon an irrational foundation. I hope you hear that fully, because so much of what emanates from them is coming from a place of falsehood. They operate with an alternate reality, thinking that the world is supposed to revolve around them, and it becomes your task to figure that out and conform to who they are and to what they think. That's their starting point, and it makes no sense given the fact that we're also deeply interconnected with each other. So that's the first thing we need to understand about where they're coming from. Second, one of the things that the narcissists bring to the equation is they honestly believe that you're supposed to be impressed by their interpretation of events or relationships. They have a deep hunger for affirmation. So when they say, here's the way I think it needs to be, or this is how I interpret it, they want you to affirm that. Oh, yes, you make sense. And if you don't, or if you don't do it strongly enough or quickly enough, then here comes the anger, and so much of their anger is fed by that yearning that they have to be the ultimate person who gets to be affirmed on so many different levels. A third thing that we need to understand about narcissists with their anger is they truly think that they're unique in a very superior kind of way. We each are going to be unique, but their uniqueness is like, well, yeah, but I'm unique better than everybody else. And so knowing that they think that way, it makes it easy for us to then recognize that when they have an anger outburst, they're going to be coming at you from a superior position. I'm better than you, which means you're lesser than, and so that informs the way that they conduct themselves during anger episodes. A fourth thing that we want to remember is that to the narcissist, you're a nuisance. You're a nobody. You're not allowed to have a voice. Keeping in mind that part of the definition of narcissism involves a lack of empathy. They don't care what you feel, and they don't even want to take into account what's going on inside of you. They'll not make any effort to learn and to base their responses based on a healthy understanding of you. No empathy, meaning that you're just a nuisance. If you say, hey, wait a minute, I've got something I want you to consider, it's like, shut up, I don't need that. That's how they think. That's part of their starting point. A fifth thing to keep in mind is that part of narcissism involves such a heavy and persistent need to control that it causes them to become fearful of your non-conformity to their control. In other words, when you are an independent thinker, they take that as a direct challenge against them, as opposed to saying, well, I know everybody likes to think for themselves. They can't think that way. They've got to control, and that control then becomes part of the way that they manage anger. And then going right along with that, number 6, because of their controlling and authoritative drive, they don't know what to do when you set boundaries. Let's keep in mind that boundaries arises from you having a strong definition of who you are, and you're going to live inside your definition of yourself. Their thinking is, but your boundaries are irrelevant. You just need to do what I say. And they've never met a boundary that they just won't step all over. And so that becomes part of their use of anger, or what they bring to the anger equation. And then finally, the seventh thing that we need to remember is narcissists absolutely dread feeling embarrassed. Once you find yourself in conflict with a narcissist, it's a virtual guarantee they're going to start playing head games with you. That's why I put together a new course. It's very extensive, called Anger Games. I'm going to teach you how to manage anger and conflict with a narcissist. There's a link below that's going to show you how to register, and I hope that you find it to be very insightful.